Let me tell you something about success. Success is never convenient. It doesn't wait for approval, and it doesn't arrive with noise. It comes when no one's watching. When others are sleeping, someone is building. For a long time, the world was watching the wrong direction. Everyone was looking west. They were asking, who's the next superpower? Who has the biggest economy? But while they were asking questions, India was building answers. I've seen this before. People laughed at China 30 years ago. They said we couldn't do it. But we didn't argue, we just worked. Today, I'm seeing the same spirit in India. Quiet, determined, hungry, relentless. The world woke up too late. By the time they noticed, India had already started leading in technology, in education, in global talent, and in entrepreneurship. This is not a fluke. This is the result of vision, sweat, and a belief that we don't need to be like them, we need to be better than we were yesterday. India didn't wait for the invitation to lead. India claimed its seat. So today, let me speak to the dreamers, the builders, and the believers. The future is no longer about who controls the past. It's about who controls the platform. And India is now building the platform for the future of the world. Opportunity is not a secret formula. It is not locked behind billion-dollar gates or given only to a few. It is everywhere, floating in conversations, hiding in problems, walking the streets of villages and cities alike. The real issue is not the lack of opportunity, but the lack of awareness. Most people are asleep while the world is changing. They scroll, they complain, they compare. But opportunity doesn't wait. It favors those who are alert, those who read patterns, who listen deeply, who act quickly. India didn't wait for the perfect condition to rise. There was no perfect economy, no perfect infrastructure. But India had something better. People who were awake, entrepreneurs who built with what they had, youth who learned even when resources were limited, and leaders who took bold bets on the digital age. While others doubted, India noticed the cracks in the old systems and planted seeds in them. You see, the problem is that most people are waiting for someone to tap their shoulder and say, now is the time. But there is no perfect time. That's a lie we've been told. The time is when you decide to stop waiting. The people of India didn't wait for global validation to believe in themselves. They started startups from apartments. They turned mobile phones into classrooms. They turned payment apps into national systems. Why? Because they were awake. Awake to the possibilities, awake to their potential. The rest of the world was sleeping in comfort, but India was hustling in uncertainty, and that's where transformation happens. Comfort never creates change. Crisis does. And those who are alert during crisis become the architects of the new economy. When the world was asking what's next, India was already building it. That's what happens when you see what others ignore. Let me tell you a secret. Opportunity doesn't shout, it whispers. It whispers through market gaps, silent frustrations, unmet needs. But only the awake can hear it. Many countries waited for government reforms, trade deals, perfect capital, but India's people used imperfection as inspiration. They saw a broken education system and built edtech giants. They saw long bank lines and built UPI. They saw rural limits and built digital reach. Every problem became a prototype. That's how awake minds work. They don't complain about the wall, they look for a door or build one. I've met Indian founders who started with $0 and now lead billion-dollar firms. What did they have? Hunger, discipline, and most importantly, eyes wide open. While others hit the snooze button on innovation, India got up early. That's why it's winning. Awareness is the most underrated competitive advantage. You don't need to be a genius, you just need to notice what others overlook. Most people are too busy consuming to create, too busy reacting to act. But awareness separates dreamers from doers. India's rise is not accidental. It's the result of a nation that woke up earlier to the digital revolution, earlier to AI, earlier to mobile-first economies. While others were debating legacy models, Indian entrepreneurs were creating leaner, faster, mobile solutions. They didn't wait for a Silicon Valley stamp. They created Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Pune into global tech hubs. The world thought opportunity only lived in tall glass towers in New York or London. But India showed that opportunity grows faster in places where resilience is high and excuses are low. That's how you lead, not by waiting for chances, but by recognizing that every disadvantage contains a hidden door. Let me ask you this. How many people missed the internet boom because they thought it was just for geeks? How many missed the crypto wave because it looked risky? How many are now sleeping through the AI revolution, waiting for the perfect entry? The world doesn't reward late risers. The world doesn't wait for you to be ready. India understood this. That's why it didn't wait to catch up. It leapfrogged. When 4G came, India didn't just use it for entertainment. It used it for empowerment. Young coders in Tier 2 cities started solving problems the world didn't even know existed. Why? Because they were awake, not just in body, but in mindset. That's what separates the leader from the follower. It's not luck, it's the discipline of observation and the courage to act. You don't need $1 million to chase opportunity. You need 1 million eyes open. Open to trends, open to feedback, open to taking risks that make sense. That's how you build something that lasts. When India saw its youth population growing, it didn't treat it as a burden. It treated it as the biggest asset. When people said too many mouths to feed, India said too many minds to empower. And it worked. Millions of Indians are now leading innovations across the globe, not because they were given everything, but because they saw something in everything. That's the power of awareness. A broken classroom becomes an app. A traffic jam becomes a logistics startup. A daily inconvenience becomes a billion-dollar idea. But you have to be awake to see it. The future is not created by countries with the most money. It is created by people with the most momentum. And momentum comes from movement. India is moving, not just geographically or economically, but mentally. It has shifted from can we to we are. That shift only happens when a nation wakes up. And now the world is realizing, too late, that India is not emerging. It has already emerged. You can't see a sunrise if your eyes are closed. The world is waking up to India's sunrise, but the sun has been rising for a while. The lesson here isn't just about India. It's about all of us. Wake up before the world does. See the wave before it crashes. If you wait for it to be obvious, you're already too late. So let me finish with this. Opportunity has no nationality. It doesn't care if you're rich or poor. It doesn't care what your last name is. It only cares about one thing. Are you awake? India said yes. That's why it's winning. That's why it's leading. It didn't chase someone else's dream. It woke up to its own. And now the world is paying attention. My question to you is, what will you do with this awareness? Will you keep waiting? Or will you rise with the sun and say, now is my time? Because opportunity is here. It's around you. It's in you. But only the awake can see it. When I started Alibaba, I wasn't the biggest. We weren't the most funded. But we were fast. We saw the internet coming, and we moved when others hesitated. That's the game now. Speed beats size. In the old world, the big ate the small. In the new world, the fast eat the slow. Look around. Companies with thousands of employees are getting disrupted by 2 kids in a garage. Bureaucracies are being outpaced by boldness. That's why India is rising, not because it's the biggest, but because it's becoming the fastest. Fast to adopt digital payments, fast to train AI engineers, fast to innovate in sectors like healthcare, education, and logistics. The world's biggest empires once laughed at Indian technology. Now they're learning from it. Because the future doesn't belong to who started first, but to who moves first when it matters most. India's success story isn't built on size. It's built on speed of thought, speed of decision, and speed of action. That's what sets apart modern leadership. While global giants were still talking in boardrooms, Indian entrepreneurs were launching apps from bedrooms. While policymakers elsewhere debated regulations, Indian coders were shipping solutions. That's the new reality. You don't need a skyscraper to make an impact. You need execution speed. India's digital stack was deployed faster than most countries imagined possible. UPI, Aadhaar, and now ONDC. These aren't just tools. They're signals. Signals that a country long labeled developing is now designing the future. If you blink, you'll miss what's next. Speed is not about rushing. It's about responsiveness. The ones who win are not those who know the most, but those who adapt the fastest. That's how India has begun outmaneuvering giants who were once untouchable. Being big makes you slow. You spend more time managing than innovating, more time preserving than progressing. But the world doesn't have patience anymore. Customers don't wait, markets don't wait, innovation doesn't wait. The world belongs to those who solve problems now. And India has shown that when you remove friction, when you empower the youth, when you bet on digital, you don't just catch up, you leapfrog. From startups in Bangalore to fintech in Mumbai to coders in Kochi, every part of India is becoming a speed lab for the world. If you think success is about building a massive company slowly over 50 years, you're playing the wrong game. In today's world, a kid with a laptop can change the financial system. A fast-moving idea can destroy a legacy business in a week. This is the revolution of velocity. And India is riding the front of that wave. Let me tell you something from my own journey. We didn't have the money, we didn't have the experience, but we had speed. We failed fast, learned fast, moved fast. That's how Alibaba survived. And that's what I see in India today. An ecosystem that's not afraid to experiment, not afraid to pivot, not afraid to fall, because they know how to rise quickly. That mindset is what the world is missing. Big companies fear change. Fast companies create it. And what's India doing now? It's not just responding to trends, it's setting them. Look at how India embraced mobile-first design, rural connectivity, and AI. This didn't happen by accident. It happened because young people refused to wait for permission. In a fast-moving world, speed is intelligence, and India is showing incredible IQ by acting when others are still thinking. You can't win tomorrow's race with yesterday's tools. That's the mistake many legacy powers are making. They rely on what made them big instead of learning what makes others fast. But speed is the new currency. It multiplies talent, shortens learning curves, and delivers impact faster than capital ever could. India realized this early. It didn't just copy the West. It created its own operating system. Faster, leaner, more inclusive. And now, countries are looking to India for playbooks. Think about that. The world's biggest economies are asking, how did India do it? Not because India is the richest, but because it's the quickest to build, scale, and solve. That's the new influence. Not who has the most GDP, but who moves from idea to execution the fastest. That's leadership in the digital age. Here's the difference between the big and the fast. Big waits for certainty. Fast creates it. Big asks for permission. Fast asks for forgiveness. Big talks about innovation. Fast is innovation. India has learned this well. Every day, thousands of startups are proving that speed is the real advantage in today's hyper-connected economy. Platforms like Zerodha, Swiggy, Byju's, and PhonePe weren't born from massive resources. They were born from urgency and agility. And now, they are reshaping entire industries. You see, speed doesn't mean recklessness. It means clarity. Clarity of mission, clarity of need, and clarity of now. That's what India has. Clarity about the future and courage to chase it without delay. That's why the world must pay attention, not because India is loud, but because India is fast. Think of it like this. In a relay race, the handoff is everything. The country that can pass the baton of innovation from one generation to the next without dropping it wins. India has mastered that handoff. From traditional business to digital-first startups, from analog systems to cloud NAT models, the transformation is rapid and it's redefining how nations grow. While some are stuck protecting old industries, India is investing in future ones. That's a sign of speed-driven vision. It's no longer about how long you've been in the game, but how quickly you can change the game. And India is now the game changer. In the past, speed was a bonus. Today it's survival. And India has made speed its identity. So the lesson is simple. If you want to lead, move fast. If you want to remain relevant, move faster. The size of your company, your nation, or your legacy doesn't matter anymore. The information, resources, captains, or governors, what matters is your speed to respond, speed to serve, and speed to scale. That's why India's rise is not a surprise, it's a result of acting faster, learning faster, and daring faster than the rest. The world watched and waited. India moved. And now the world is asking how to keep up. That's the new global dynamic. Speed is not just an edge, it's the only edge. India proved that the future doesn't wait for the biggest name, it follows the fastest mover. When people ask me, Jack, what's the secret to China's growth? I always say, it's not buildings, not machines, not money. It's people. You want to build a company? Invest in your team. You want to build a nation? Invest in your citizens. That's exactly what India is doing. While many countries focused on importing resources or controlling natural wealth, India turned its focus inward toward its greatest resource, its people. Look at the numbers. Over 65% of the population is under 35. This isn't a statistic, it's a superpower. But numbers don't win by themselves. What matters is what you do with them. And India made a bold choice to educate, to skill, to empower. From coding boot camps to youth innovation challenges, from digital literacy to entrepreneurship programs, India is building a generation of creators, not just consumers. Because the real infrastructure of the future is not concrete, it's human potential. Let me tell you something. Buildings crumble, machines become obsolete. But people grow, evolve, innovate. If you pour resources into highways but neglect human hearts and minds, your progress is temporary. That's what separates lasting power from short-term noise. And India understood this. That's why the transformation is not just digital, it's deeply personal. Villages with Wi-Fi, students learning AI on mobile phones, rural women becoming e-commerce entrepreneurs. These are not headlines. These are the seeds of a new India. A country where a farmer's daughter can become a data scientist. A street vendor can manage payments through UPI. That happens only when you believe your people are capable of more. India didn't just invest in them, it believed in them. Also, let's treat India like parents. We've got an inner parent, and we want it to be the kind that draws them in, and belief is the most powerful investment of all. When you look at people not as laborers but as leaders, the whole system changes. People become powerful when they're given purpose. Money helps, technology helps, but what really transforms a person is knowing they matter. India's greatest move wasn't building apps or factories. It was building dignity, digital inclusion, financial literacy, and startup culture have become tools for purpose. When a young man in a small town gets access to a free online course and learns to code, he doesn't just gain a skill, he gains confidence. When a woman starts her first online business through WhatsApp and begins earning, she doesn't just earn money, she earns freedom. That's what investment in people does. It unlocks something deeper than economy. It unlocks identity. And when people know who they are and what they can do, they stop waiting for the world to change. They begin changing it themselves. This is how nations rise, not with permission, but with people who have found their power. Look at history. Every great civilization declined when it stopped investing in people and started investing in monuments to ego. When leaders focus on pride more than people, decline is inevitable. But when a country lifts its people, the people lift the country. That's the model India is proving. Government programs like Skill India, Digital India, Startup India, they're not just slogans, they are systems for empowerment. And what's powerful is that the private sector followed. Angel investors, venture capitalists, accelerators, they saw what the government saw. Untapped genius in every neighborhood, every language, every background. And when you combine policy with purpose, you get progress. That's why Indian founders are everywhere now, in Silicon Valley, in Dubai, in Singapore, in Nairobi. Because India didn't just build businesses, it built builders. And builders don't just create companies, they create economies. Some nations think their power lies in weapons, others think it lies in currency. But the nations that will dominate the future are those that dominate human development. You can't import character. You can't outsource creativity. You must build it from the ground up. And India is doing this, not by copying others, but by cultivating its own strengths. Regional talent, multilingual intelligence, cultural adaptability, emotional resilience. These are assets no market index can fully capture, but they are shaping the future. I've met Indian founders who failed twice, 3 times, and still got up and still built something remarkable. That's not luck, that's training. That's a system that gives room for mistakes, learning, and rebirth. That's an investment in mindset, not just output. And that's what the next global leaders must learn from India. Train your people like your future depends on them. Because it does. You can give a person money and they'll survive the week. You give them a vision and they'll thrive for a lifetime. That's the model I see working in India. The shift from employment to empowerment. From job seekers to job creators. This mental shift is everything. And it only happens when a country tells its people, you are not a liability. You are our greatest strength. Education is not just about degrees, it's about unlocking potential. And India is doing this in real time. With every rural coding school, with every edtech startup, with every startup pitch from someone who was once told no. I've seen this before. When people are truly invested in, they outperform all expectations. Because belief builds courage, and courage builds companies, and companies build countries. True leaders are not remembered for what they built. They're remembered for who they built. That's the mark of India's growth today. It's not just in its GDP. It's in the dignity of its people, in their growing self-confidence, in their global presence, in the engineers solving global problems, in the doctors leading international breakthroughs, in the entrepreneurs building products not just for India, but for the world. That didn't happen by accident. It happened by intention. A country made a bet on its people. And the people are delivering. So that's how long-term dominance is created. Not by chance, not by inheritance, but by consistent investment in the human engine of progress. People first, everything else follows. So what's the takeaway here? If you want to build anything that lasts, invest in people. Not just in training, but in trust. Not just in skills, but in spirit. India's rise is not just economic. It's emotional, it's cultural, it's deeply human. And that's why it's unstoppable. Because when people feel seen, heard, and believed in, they rise higher than any system imagined. The world woke up too late to India's people, but it won't be able to ignore them anymore, because they are not coming, they have already arrived. And they are building something not just for today, but for generations to come. That's what happens when you stop measuring progress only in profits and start measuring it in people. The world is finally opening its eyes, but India has already taken flight. While others were waiting for signals, India was building systems. While others chased size, India mastered speed. And while others invested in steel and stone, India invested in something far more powerful, its people. This is not just a moment for India, it is a movement of ideas, of innovation, of unstoppable human spirit. The new world is not being led by those with the loudest voice, but by those with the clearest vision. And India's vision is sharp, bold, and already in motion. If the future belongs to the fast, to the fearless, and to the faithful, then the future already belongs to India. So my message to the world is simple. Stop underestimating. Start learning, because by the time you catch up, India will already be writing the next chapter.